I would like to ask Dr. Farooq Azam to kindly say a few words about his view about peace and a brief description of his future talk.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure being invited here. This Afghan Academy, which has done a lot of good works in the past more than 3 decades. I know Shapur Amini and his academy for a long time. They are doing constructive work, and this kind of work that now is going on is one example of that. I think such a conference like today, that is the necessity of the time, as peace talks are going on in Doha. So hope that this academy make more progress in this connection. Coming to the peace process, I think that is a very difficult job because I was involved in bringing peace, and I was calling from the beginning that this war has no military winner. And at that time, this is my saying was not welcomed in the international community as well as inside Afghanistan. But I constantly was drumming this drum that there was no political military solution to the Afghan problem. Today, we are faced with a very difficult time because of 2 big powers invaded Afghanistan and tried to reformulate our society. The Soviet Union, with big might of the world, they tried with huge amount of money and military power to change our society. And as well as the United States did that one. Certainly our neighbors also in between tried to influence Afghanistan and shape the country what they want. But the US invasion and the international community input, that is a huge. With 150,000 world-class soldiers, along with billions and billions and billions of dollars invested in Afghanistan to reshape the country, that has made effect. So new people came into being, a new class of people are there. We didn't know corruption in that level. Now we have a very corrupt society, very corrupt government. We have people who have no connection with the mass at all, but they are in power. We have, as Professor Sattar Sirat mentioned, that the foreigners have divided us on the basis of religion, on the basis of tribes, on the basis of ethnic groups, on the basis of this, on the basis of that, and invested billions of dollars in these things. So now, in Doha, such divided people are sitting, and they are allowed to reunite or to reconcile. It is not easy. I am afraid that even these Afghans will be there if we do not help them, if they are not quite sensitive, if they do not think a lot. Probably they will be allowed or intervened in the way that they are stuck in the meetings, they do not go forward, and finally they will be offered a foreign formula for implementation, and that will be a peace that will be carrying on instability in itself. But I put forward to them several way of future government, which is one of them is the neutral interim administration, that probably if they do not come, either the Afghan government will ask the Taliban to to surrender, to accept this government. If that becomes the Taliban say, okay, we will lay down our arm, that is okay, but it is not feasible. For also, the Kabul government may not accept the Taliban rule. So the coalition government, that is, we have experienced the Khalq Parcham coalition, we experienced Mujahideen coalition, we experienced 20 years of coalition governments. So that is a kind of miss, a kind of destruction, kind of misery that will happen to Afghanistan. That doesn't work. So the other way is whether probably that is also a solution, that the, the presidentship given to Taliban and the government through the prime ministership given, the government given to the Kabul current government, to the professionals, like Iranian type is there. That probably is another alternative. But if none of them works for them or not acceptable, then I propose a new thing. That to the first, but that should be some with some kind of conditions. One, the sovereignty, the political independence, the first feature of Afghanistan that should be accepted by the international community. So these refugees must return to Afghanistan. The other point should be considered in that interim administration, that is, all international aid should go to through the government. No country will be allowed to pour money through their own NGOs or through their own channels. The only channel should be the Afghan government, because we have experienced that all those countries who have spent money through their NGOs or their embassies, they have given to certain tribes, to certain people, and they enriched some people, some tribes, and used them against each others. So this must be stopped. And the reconstruction money must come through the government. Annual country has helping the Afghanistan should help through the government. And the other point is that the weapon must be confiscated, and the whole weapon should be collected. Only legal weapons should be left to the hands of people. Some nomads are in need of weapons. Some people who are hunting, they need weapons. Some people in the rural areas, they need for their safety some weapon. But these legal weapons should be discussed, defined by the government, and no one should have illegal weapon in their hand. Once these things are done, this neutral administration, interim administration, that should conduct fair elections, fair in direction, accessible to all election, and the government top people like the president, the minister, the supreme judges, and the attorney general, they must not take part in the coming government. So when the election happened, this government must transfer power to that elected government. Other point that we raised is that how to make this peace permanent, sustainable, how to make this peace lead to stability, to progress of the country, and to be sustainable. That is also we have worked upon in two ways that one is that what are the challenges towards the future government? What after when the next government comes in the result of peace, what challenges that government is faces. What are these challenges? There are many challenges, and we described made the list, and we have to address those challenges and find answer to those challenges. For example, the military, the military, what we should do with the military, the current military. What about the Taliban militants? What about the police? The police is now working as soldiers. They are not police anymore. How to bring them back to police? What is the duty of the soldiers? Because our security forces have hit by big superpowers, and they've changed their own definition from serving the people to serving the others. So we have to think about, to give a due place to our security forces, and at the same time our education. That is by invasions, successive invasions, that has changed. If you want to have a bachelor degree, master degree, you can buy it within a few amount of dollars in the Kabul streets. There are, in every street, there is a university with no standard of education. Very few people can be graduated with due qualification. So these how we to take back our education to a standard education, to be worth to serve the country. There are many, how we can heal the national unity among different types, different people that is affected badly by foreigners. Foreigners have spent billions of dollars to divide us. How we can come together among ourselves? How can build unity? How can we give hand to each other? So that or many other challenges are there that we have worked upon, and we have proposed this to the parties concerned, that when the peace comes, for the stability, for the prosperity of the country, we have to address our challenges, and we have to find answer to those challenges. Also, we may have opportunities. If there is peace, if we have a peace in Afghanistan, that will serve our regional countries, or the regional peace will be served. We can be a good partner of the international community. So we will have some opportunities. What are these opportunities? We have listed those opportunities, and how we can exploit those opportunities, how we can use these opportunities for the benefit of our people. So these are the parameters that the peace can make sustainable. So I think we have the task. Those who are in the West, those who are inside Afghanistan, who have knowledge of the last over 40 years of the Afghans, they have to help those who are in negotiation in Doha to reach an agreement, to work hard and understand that 40 years of foreign interference had divided us, how we can come together and how to make peace for our future generations. So once again, thank you very much, Shafur Amini, and this is Afghan Academy, and I think we can speak more when the time comes. Thank you very much.
Dr. Said Mohtaram, thank you.
السلام عليكم، خوش آمدین بازم.
تشکر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. الحمدلله و الصلاة و السلام علی حضرت رسوله صلی الله علیه و سلم. اما بعد. Thank you, Ms. Amini and Mr. Amini, Dr. Amini, for creating this environment for discussing the current situation in our homeland and for all the work you've done. And I want to also extend my greetings to all of your guests, those who are on the panel, as well as those who are watching it from around the world, I hope. The topic that I had promised to speak about is a political economy of rented regimes in Afghanistan in its implications for peace, security, and justice, both now and in the future. Much of what Professor Sirat and also Dr. Azam have discussed about the current situation of the country, not only over the last 40 years, but in the last 140 years, is very closely related to this political economy of state dependency on outside sources. And unless and until we have understood this properly and understood its implications, we may not understand why wars are not winnable. Are they meant to be winnable? How are our current wars in the last 60, 70 years since the end of World War II, have went on forever if they have started in one place, stopped in another, and then yet another place has been drawn into war? Why are war a constant of the third world countries? These are very serious and very important questions that we need to understand, and to not to understand what we are in terms of political ecology of the modern world, we will be essentially swimming in the same pool of really serious misery and indignity. In my judgment, peace is nothing but human dignity. When we lose our human dignity, we cannot expect much else from ourselves or from others around and about us. Let me just briefly explain how imperialism and colonialism have affected the current environment around the world, particularly for non-Western world or the South, and that they are not capable of making independent decisions about themselves the way Europeans were capable of doing that, or Americans were capable of doing that 200-300 years ago. But for the last 100 years, 150 years, much of the rest of the world have not been able to do the same thing that Europeans could do. And to a large extent, in my judgment, the European success, the Western success, has been contingent, essentially, more or less, on wars elsewhere and poverty elsewhere. In a country where I live, constitutes 4% of the world's population, but consumes 40% of the world's wealth. How is that going to change? And who is going to change it? And what can we be expecting from the future? Let me just turn to the environment where we live in Afghanistan. We were enjoying for a very, very long time empires of faith. That imperial systems were based on religion. And you had them until essentially the onset of the Western empires of commerce, which came after Industrial Revolution. That they started peddling their new manufactured ware, cheaper and better in some respects, to the rest of the world. And pretty soon, when they got footing in other parts of the world for their commerce, it had to be protected. So followed by empires of conquest. That they came with their military and soldiers and exploited regions where there were rich resources and brought it to Europe and built European civilization and capitalism and so on and so forth. This was very easy and very clear for people who had been occupied and colonized to understand that they were colonized. So they fought back. And they fought back, and then they were given independence. And the assumption was the independence was going to be truly returning the dignity of those who had been colonized back into free and capable human beings who could manage their own affairs. But that was not to be. Europe itself had already experienced 2 world wars because of nationalist ideologies of nationalism, and that they knew how to morph themselves from empires by conquest, which they gave up, into a new form of empire that is far more dangerous but less understood, and that is empires by invitation, or even Americans call it empires of trust. That yes, they give people independence, but they also made them dependent. In the case of Afghanistan in 1880, when Abdurrahman Khan was crowned in Kabul, the British India told them that he was free to do anything he wants in its own country as long as he manages to keep it in control and create the barrier between their empire from Tsarist empire. So they gave him money, which he called Puli Khodadad, money coming from God, while in fact it was coming from the treasury of British India. And he used that to do what? He was not there to serve his own people. He was there to serve for those who were paying him to be on the throne, both cash and weapons. So the creation of modern Afghanistan and modern a lot of other states in other parts of the world were to serve these so-called empires who had given them independence, but in fact made totally dependent on them, and that their job was essentially to fight their own people and keep them in check and control. And the story of what happened in the 21 years of Abdurrahman Khan's reign is very, very well known to everyone in Afghanistan. His son continued to follow essentially the same thing. They did very little to help industrialize or modernize or do much of anything in the country. Their preoccupation was how to hold on to their power. Amanullah Khan, when he came to declare independence, what happened? He lost the subsidy. And his reign, despite his ambitions for industrializing, modernizing, and everything else, there was not much to do it with, because his father and grandfather had not built wealth. They had dependent on the wealth that was coming to them to run their own country. So his efforts essentially fell short, and he tried to get some, essentially collect rent, if you like, from the Bolsheviks. They didn't do as much as he expected, or any of the other countries. What happened? Civil war, he was driven out of the country. The first one without substantial outside subsidies. And the person who followed him lasted 9 months because nobody was willing to give him a penny. And of course, the treasuries were exhausted within 9 months, civil war, and comes a new king installed again by British, with British money, with British weapons. Nader Khan. So you know, he and his brothers, until World War II, managed the country again as a prison. It's wonderful to sort of look back and say, oh, we didn't have any wars. You know, there are very few wars and conflicts within prisons, except occasionally. When you have weapons and money from outside and your job is to keep people in check, you do that. And you don't care about anyone else except your own interests as a group, is a very small group. In Afghanistan, it would be a mistake, anybody to say that the Pashtuns categorically did that. No, a very small group of Pashtuns did all the harm against other Pashtuns as well as against the rest of the society. After World War II, once again, the Cold War came and empires shifted into shape of empire by invitation. By then, most of the third world countries had gotten their independence, but they were not independent. They became dependent again through another form of war. This one was, in fact, two kinds of war. One was proxy wars that the socialist camp and the capitalist camp were fighting against one another in other people's countries, because during the wars, they had built such a huge military industry that it was part of their economy. It had to be going on. And that they decided not going to fight each other in Europe or in America. But they had to keep these military industrial complex going. And that this is the largest part of their production. They produce, and in all the wars after World War II that has been fought around the world, particularly in the third world countries, in small countries, tell me whether those countries built up one bullet themselves. Their bullets and their weapons all came and were given, in fact, for free to the third world countries and created those divisions along ethnicity, language, sect, you know what. And they have maintained that. But the other side of this new empire by invitation or empire of trust is humanitarian wars. That they are not only giving money for the countries to destroy themselves, but they're also willing to give lots of money to feed them, to keep them fighting, to even build sometimes schools and roads and universities and so forth. So that this is another form of war, humanitarian war. It's not humanitarian assistance, I'm sorry. It is a misnomer. It's a very clever ploy that much of these countries are being, in fact, smothered with love, if you like. That look, we're doing, we've spent billions and billions and hundreds of billions giving in aid. Why are those aids not producing anything in these societies? Why are we still poorer than we ever were? And this is the situation that happened in the 1980s when the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. The multiplicity of foreign intervention was in the form of humanitarian war, as well as proxy war. They kept giving mujahideen. Earlier, only Kabul got this and kept itself on the throne. Now they had created 7 organizations that they were giving money to and weapons to, and in Peshawar, and 7 more in Mashhad in Iran. And that the recipients multiplied. And therefore the war intensified and multiplied. And then came the era of America winning the Cold War and the world becoming unipolar. Soviet Union was no longer there, but they had to create new enemies, and the new enemies were formed. in the form of radical Islamist groups. And the rest of the story is well known to you. I don't need to go there. But the point is, once they came out, the notion of empire by invitation had gotten strength, that there were now smaller competitors who wanted to be invited also to come to the aid or help of Afghans of various factions that they had created in the 1980s. So that regional players got into the game. And in 2001, in 9/11 events, we got a whole new reality in Afghanistan with the amount of aid offered, with amount of, again, really humanitarian war being intensified, as well as proxy war being intensified, both locally, regionally, and so forth. So we are in a vicious circle. A vicious circle that is no longer in our control. We, in the last 40 years of war in Afghanistan, tell me if anybody has built a single gun. They have used millions of guns to kill each other, to destroy their own country. What has war contributed to Afghanistan? You know, in Western literature, we read about wars made nations. Yes, because they produced their own war material and produced industries which had to be kept on after they stopped fighting each other. And we are essentially, some countries in the Middle East particularly, the oil-rich countries, have been buying billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of weapons and giving their own precious resources to the West to keep their, maintain their economies, maintain their lifestyle. And yet who is dying? We are essentially employed, no longer is anything else but people to kill each other for them. When are we going to learn? They built their nations through war and made their economies what they are. What has war done for us other than destroying us, both physically in destroying our resources, destroying our own countries? When are we coming to understand that the game we're in is a vicious one, a subtle one? And they're doing it. They have done both things. They fight hot wars in the same place, as well as humanitarian wars in the same place. We are always at war. There is no possibility, no potential. I am sorry to say that Doha and beyond is not going to be much different, because the world order is a mess. It's the one that's created for insecurity. And the reason they don't want to win any wars. Wars that are won, problem is solved. New empires of trust or empires by invitation are not there to solve problems. They're there to manage problems. And they're doing it very well. And as long as, and the reason why they can't war, I mean, America, if spends maybe $2 trillion in a country in hot war as well as humanitarian war against a bunch of lunatics, essentially, with very little in hand, how could they not win that war? It doesn't make any damn sense. They don't want to win it, because if they won it, the problem is solved. Empire is about being there, staying there, and messing there. It's not about solving and getting a pat on the back and saying thank you very much. You have solved our problems. We should not expect the West to solve these problems, because their dignity and their pride and everything is contingent on our indignity, on our poverty, on our inhumanity in many ways. So we need to come to understand that as long as we don't understand, as long as we're there ready to be rented, And there are governments, the government in Kabul has been a rented regime. And the governments before that have been all in some form or fashion, to some degree, rented regimes. They're not rentier regimes, because rentier ones are like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. They have oil to sell and get money and then make their life with that. We are only collecting rent to do the bedding of those who are paying the rent. And that is, all they ask from us is to fight each other, to kill each other, and to contribute to our own indignity. So when we wake up and when we understand where we are and what we are, then we may be able to understand, to figure out whether there is a way out of this. Unfortunately, the vicious circle is closed in. They're not going to allow. And that's why you move from one war to the next. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, you go on and on. This is not something incidental. It's not just happening because of something unknown. No, it is part of a system, a systemic way of abuse, and abuse of especially smaller nations with no ability to essentially maintain or willing to go to poverty for a while. Chinese did it, for God's sake. Chinese did for several decades, suffered poverty, all kinds of things, didn't take anything from anybody, but pulled themselves together where they could now become a world power. We are not willing to do that even for a short while because our elite are so tied into this system, and that those who are funding it also know it so well that they will continue to feed them on and keep the system going the way it is. So my unfortunate conclusion is that Afghanistan is not going to come out of this mess anytime soon, unless and until we understand what we are in. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sepp.
Thank you very much, Professor.
You're most welcome.